The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway 3 hours earlier than expected. Eddie Wilcox, home inspector extraordinaire, returning from what should have been a 2-day job in Portland. The client had canceled last minute, something about a family emergency, leaving me with an unexpected evening at home with Hannah. My wife's silver Honda sat in its usual spot, but the house looked oddly quiet. No lights in the kitchen where she usually prepped dinner. No glow from the living room television. Just the porch light casting long shadows across our modest craftsman home. I grabbed my toolbox from the truck bed, keys jingling against the metal handle. 23 years I'd been doing home inspections, and I'd developed a sixth sense for things that weren't quite right. The same instinct that helped me spot rotting floor joists and faulty wiring was now telling me something was off about my own house. The front door opened with its familiar squeak. Hannah had been after me to oil those hinges for months. I set my toolbox down quietly, listening. Then I heard it. Laughter. Hannah's laugh, bright and musical, drifting down from upstairs. She wasn't alone. My first thought was that Monica, her best friend and business partner, had stopped by. They often worked late on design projects, spreading fabric samples and paint chips across our dining room table like some kind of decorating war room. But this laughter had an intimate quality that made my stomach tighten. I climbed the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The laughter grew louder, mixed now with a man's voice I didn't recognize. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached our bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I saw him first. Greg Flanders, the hotshot real estate agent who'd been making waves around town with his flashy red Mustang and even flashier sales pitches. He was sitting on the edge of my bed, shirt unbuttoned, tie draped over my nightstand. Hannah stood near the window, still fully dressed but with her hair down in that way she used to wear it when we were dating. She was smiling at him with an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in years. "The coast is always clear," she was saying. "Eddie won't be back until tomorrow night." My hands clenched into fists. I pushed the door open wider, stepping into the room. Surprise! Hannah spun around, her face draining of color. Greg jumped up so fast he nearly tripped over his own shoes. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the tick of our bedside clock, the one Hannah had bought for our 10th anniversary. "Eddie?" Hannah stammered. You're early." "Yeah, funny how that works." I kept my voice level, though every muscle in my body was coiled tight. Client canceled. Thought I'd come home and surprise my loving wife. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Greg had managed to get his shirt mostly buttoned, but his tie hung crooked and his hair was messed up. He cleared his throat. "Eddie, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Really? Because it looks like you're in my bedroom, with my wife, at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. What exactly should it look like?" "We were just talking business," Hannah said quickly. "Greg's helping me find a new office space for the firm." "In our bedroom." We came up here to get some papers from my desk. I glanced at Hannah's small writing desk in the corner. It was clear except for a lamp and a small potted plant. No papers in sight. "What papers?" Greg took a step toward the door. "Look, I should probably go." "Yeah, you should." I moved to block his path. At 6'2" and 200 pounds of muscle built from years of crawling through attics and basements, I had a significant advantage over the slim real estate agent. "But first, I think we need to clear the air." "Eddie, please," Hannah said. "Don't make this worse than it has to be." "Worse?" I turned to look at her. "Sweetheart, I just found another man in our bedroom, and you're worried about me making it worse?" Greg straightened his tie, trying to recover some composure. "We're all adults here. Maybe we can discuss this rationally." "Rationally?" I nodded slowly. "You know what's rational. Rational is coming home after 15 years of marriage and not finding your wife entertaining other men." I walked to my closet and pulled out my old aluminum baseball bat, the one I'd used in high school before I'd discovered I was better with tools than with sports. Hannah's eyes went wide. "Eddie, what are you doing?" I hefted the bat, feeling its familiar weight. "Just evening the odds." I looked at Greg. "You seem like the type who's used to having advantages. Nice car, nice clothes, smooth talk. But right now, in my house, I've got the home field advantage." Greg's face had gone pale. "You don't want to do anything you'll regret." "Oh, I won't regret this." I swung the bat in a lazy arc, connecting with the ceramic lamp on Hannah's nightstand. It exploded in a shower of white fragments, the crash echoing through the room. Hannah screamed. Greg bolted for the door, pushing past me with surprising speed. I heard him stumble down the stairs, then the front door slam. A moment later, his Mustang roared to life and peeled out of our driveway. I set the bat down and looked at Hannah, who was staring at the lamp fragments scattered across our hardwood floor. 15 years, I said quietly. Eddie, let me explain. Explain what? How long this has been going on? How many times he's been in our house? In our bed? My voice was getting louder, despite my efforts to stay calm. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller. We've been having problems. You know we have. You're always working, always tired. We barely talk anymore. So you decided to talk to Greg Flanders instead. It started innocently. He was helping me look for office space, like I said. We'd have coffee, discuss properties. He listened to me, Eddie. Really listened. And then? She looked down at the floor. Things progressed. How far? Does it matter? I picked up the bat again, and she flinched. But instead of threatening her, I leaned on it like a walking stick. Yeah, it matters. To me, it matters a lot. We haven't crossed every line. Just most of them, she nodded miserably. I walked to the window and looked out at our quiet street. Mrs. Peterson was walking her little terrier under the streetlights. The Johnsons' porch light was on, and I could see the blue flicker of their television through their front window. Normal people, living normal lives, while my world crumbled in a bedroom that smelled like another man's cologne. How long? I asked without turning around. 3 months. 3 months. A quarter of a year. All those late nights she'd claimed to be working on projects. All those weekends she'd spent shopping with Monica. All those times she'd been too tired or too stressed for conversation, for intimacy, for the basic courtesy of a marriage. Does Monica know? Hannah hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. Of course she does. I turned back to face her. Your partner in crime. She's my friend. She was trying to help me work through my feelings. By encouraging you to cheat on your husband. By encouraging me to be honest about what I need. I stared at her for a long moment. This woman I'd married, who'd stood beside me in a small church 15 years ago and promised to love and honor me. Who'd shared my bed, my dreams, my fears about the future. Who'd become a stranger while I wasn't paying attention. What you need, I said finally, is a good lawyer. Her face crumpled. Eddie, please. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything. You made your choice when you brought him into our home, into our bedroom. I headed for the door. I'll be sleeping in the basement tonight. Tomorrow we figure out how to divide everything up. Where are you going now? To clean up the mess you made. I gestured at the lamp fragments. Seems like that's going to be a full-time job for a while. I left her standing there among the broken pieces and went downstairs to get the vacuum cleaner. As I climbed back up, I heard her crying softly behind the now-closed bedroom door, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no desire to comfort her. Just a cold, calculating anger that was already starting to plan what came next. I spent the night in my basement workshop, stretched out on the old leather couch I'd rescued from a demolition job 5 years ago. The couch smelled like sawdust and WD-40, familiar scents that usually comforted me. Tonight, they just reminded me that I was sleeping in my own basement like some kind of exile. Hannah's footsteps creaked across the floor above me until well past midnight. I heard the shower running, then the hairdryer, getting ready for bed in a room that probably still reeked of Greg Flanders' cologne. The thought made my jaw clench. By morning, I'd made some decisions. I was up before dawn, showered in the basement bathroom, and dressed in my work clothes by the time Hannah came downstairs. She looked terrible, red eyes, pale skin, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She'd thrown on jeans and an old sweater, the kind of outfit she usually reserved for sick days. We need to talk, she said. No, we don't. I was at the kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and a legal pad covered with notes. We need to figure out logistics. Eddie, please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. I looked up from my screen. I listened to you for 15 years. Apparently that wasn't enough. She sat down across from me, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. What are you doing? She asked, nodding at the laptop. Research. Turns out Maine is an equitable distribution state, which means the court decides what's fair rather than just splitting everything 50-50. That's good news for me, considering you've been planning to abandon ship. I wasn't planning to abandon anything. Really? Then what exactly was your endgame with Greg? You were going to keep him as a side project indefinitely. She flinched. I don't know. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. Well, I am. I turned the laptop screen toward her. I've been looking at our finances. Joint checking account, joint savings, joint credit cards. As of this morning, I've moved half our savings into a separate account and canceled the credit cards. Her eyes widened. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It's called protecting my interests. I flipped through the pages on my legal pad. I've also contacted a locksmith. He'll be here this afternoon to change the locks. This is my house, too. Was your house. Now it's a marital asset subject to division. I took a sip of coffee, watching her face. I've also called Tom Bradley. Hannah went very still. Tom Bradley was the best divorce attorney in town, a sharp-eyed man who'd handled several high-profile cases over the years. He was expensive, but he was thorough. You're serious about this? Serious as a heart attack. I closed the laptop. Tom can see me this morning. He says Maine law is pretty clear about adultery affecting property division. You can't prove anything? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It displayed a photo I'd taken last night after she'd gone to bed. Greg's tie, still draped over my nightstand where he'd left it in his hurry to escape. Want to bet? She stared at the photo, her face cycling through several emotions. Shock, fear, anger, and finally resignation. What do you want? I want you to be honest with me. For once? I leaned back in my chair. How long has this really been going on? And don't give me that 3 months nonsense. I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to emotions, but I'm not stupid. Hannah wrapped her arms around herself, the same defensive posture she'd used last night. 6 months. The truth, Hannah. That is the truth. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to another photo, this one a screenshot of our credit card statement from 8 months ago. I'd highlighted a charge from the Lighthouse Inn, an upscale bed and breakfast about an hour up the coast. Funny thing about being a home inspector. You learn to pay attention to details, like this charge from last November. You told me you were at a design conference in Portland that weekend. Her face went white. How did you? I inspect houses for a living, sweetheart. Checking records and documentation is what I do. I scrolled to another highlighted charge. Here's another one from December, the Riverside Resort. Another weekend you were supposedly working. Eddie, I can explain. Can you explain this one? I showed her a charge from our local florist. $57 for roses. Delivered to an address I didn't recognize until I looked it up. Greg's rental house on Maple Street. She put her head in her hands. Oh, God. So let's try this again. How long? Almost a year. Her voice was barely a whisper. A year. 12 months of lies, deception, and betrayal. 12 months of coming home to a wife who was thinking about another man. 12 months of being made a fool of in my own house. I felt something cold settle in my chest, like ice water flowing through my veins. A year. Yes. And Monica knew the whole time. She found out about 6 months ago. She was trying to help me figure out what to do. What to do? I laughed, but it sounded harsh even to my own ears. Here's a thought. Maybe don't cheat on your husband. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up, gathering my papers. But you made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. What consequences? I looked down at her, this woman who'd shared my life for 15 years and thrown it all away for a smooth-talking real estate agent with a flashy car. You'll find out. I left her sitting at the kitchen table and drove to Tom Bradley's office. The lawyer was a thin, precise man in his 50s who listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. You have documentation of the affair? He asked when I finished. I handed him a folder containing printouts of the credit card charges, the photo of Greg's tie, and several other pieces of evidence I'd compiled during my sleepless night. More than enough. Tom flipped through the papers, nodding. This is good. Very good. Maine courts don't look kindly on adultery, especially when it involves marital assets being used to fund the affair. He pointed to the hotel charges. These alone could significantly impact the property division. What about the house? You've been married 15 years, and you purchased the house together? Yes, but I put down the down payment from an inheritance from my grandfather. I've also done most of the renovation work myself. That helps. We can argue for you to retain the house, especially given the circumstances. Tom leaned back in his chair. What about her business? She owns it with Monica, her friend, the one who knew about the affair. Interesting. If we can prove Monica was complicit in hiding the adultery, it might affect how we handle any business assets. Tom made another note. What do you want out of this, Eddie? I thought about Hannah sitting at our kitchen table, finally forced to face the truth about what she'd done, about Greg Flanders running half-dressed from my house, about a year of lies and deception. I want what's fair, I said, and I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Tom smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office. I think we can arrange that. Tommy Morrison had been tending bar at the Buoy for 12 years, and in that time, he'd developed an encyclopedic knowledge of local gossip. If you wanted to know who was cheating on whom, who was behind on their mortgage, or which city councilman was taking bribes, Tommy was your man. He was also my oldest friend, dating back to high school when we'd both played on the worst football team in the county's history. These days, Tommy was thin and wiry where I was broad and solid, but we still got together every few weeks to complain about the Patriots and solve the world's problems over beer. Tonight, I needed more than beer. I needed information. The Buoy sat on a side street downtown, a narrow building squeezed between a hardware store and a used bookshop. Inside, it was all dark wood and dim lighting, with a long mahogany bar that had supposedly been salvaged from a Prohibition-era speakeasy. Whether that was true or just marketing, nobody cared. The beer was cold, and the atmosphere was comfortable. I found Tommy behind the bar, polishing glasses with the methodical precision of a man who'd performed the same task thousands of times. The evening crowd was light, a few regulars nursing beers and watching the Red Sox game on the television mounted above the bar. "Eddie!" Tommy's face lit up when he saw me. "Didn't expect to see you on a Wednesday. How's Hannah?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." I slid onto a bar stool. "You got a minute?" Tommy glanced around the nearly empty bar and set down his towel. "Sure. What's going on?" "Hannah's been having an affair." Tommy's expression shifted from friendly concern to serious attention. "Aw, hell, Eddie. I'm sorry. How'd you find out?" "Came home early yesterday and found the guy in our bedroom." "Ouch." Tommy reached under the bar and produced a bottle of Jameson, pouring 2 shots. "Who's the guy?" "Greg Flanders." Tommy nearly choked on his whiskey. "The real estate guy? With the red Mustang?" "That's the one." "Son of a—" Tommy shook his head. "How long?" "About a year, near as I can tell." Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then he leaned across the bar, lowering his voice. "Eddie, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this isn't exactly a shock to everyone." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, people have been talking. Not openly, but you know how it is in a town this size. People notice things." "What kind of things?" Tommy glanced around again, making sure we couldn't be overheard. "Hannah and Greg having lunch together at that little cafe on Main Street. Multiple times. And Monica's been in here a few times with some of her friends, talking about how Hannah deserves to be happy." "Monica knew." "More than knew. From what I overheard, she was encouraging it." Tommy poured himself another shot. "There's more." "Tell me." "You know Janelle Peterson? Lives next door to you?" I nodded. Mrs. Peterson was a widow in her 70s who spent most of her time tending her garden and keeping track of neighborhood activities. Hannah always joked that she was better than a security system. "Janelle comes in here sometimes for the fish and chips on Friday nights. Last month she mentioned seeing a red Mustang in your driveway several times when your truck wasn't there." The ice water feeling was back, spreading through my chest. "She saw him at our house." "Multiple times, according to her. She was worried about it, actually. Thought maybe Hannah was in some kind of trouble." I finished my whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. "What else?" "Greg's been bragging. Not directly, but he's been talking about having a new lady friend, someone who appreciates the finer things in life, unlike his ex-wife." Greg had been divorced for about 2 years, I remembered. His ex-wife had taken him for a significant chunk of change, which might explain why he was living in a rental house instead of buying something. "He's been bragging about sleeping with my wife." Not in so many words, but yeah, the implication was pretty clear. Tommy refilled my glass without being asked. "Eddie, I should have said something earlier. I just didn't know how, and I wasn't completely sure. It's not your job to police my marriage." I took another sip of whiskey. "Besides, I probably wouldn't have believed you if you had told me." "What are you going to do?" "I've already filed for divorce, but that's just the beginning." Tommy raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I looked around the bar, noting the other customers. 2 old-timers playing cribbage in the corner, a young couple sharing nachos at a table near the window, a middle-aged woman reading a paperback novel at the end of the bar. Normal people living normal lives. "I mean, they humiliated me," I said quietly. "For a year, they made me look like a fool. Hannah brought him into our house, our bedroom. Monica helped cover it up. Greg bragged about it to anyone who would listen. So? So now it's my turn." Tommy studied my face. "Eddie, whatever you're thinking, maybe you should take some time to cool off. Make sure you don't do anything you'll regret. I'm not going to hurt anyone, if that's what you're worried about, but I'm also not going to just walk away and pretend this never happened. I finished my whiskey and stood up. They wanted to play games. Now they get to find out what happens when you play games with someone who's got nothing left to lose. I left money on the bar and headed for the door. Tommy called after me, but I didn't turn around. I had work to do. My first stop was Greg's rental house on Maple Street. It was a small Cape Cod-style home with peeling paint and a yard that needed attention. The red Mustang sat in the driveway, looking out of place against the modest surroundings. I parked across the street and waited. About 20 minutes later, Greg emerged from the house, dressed in an expensive-looking suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He looked around nervously before getting into his car, as if he expected me to jump out from behind a tree. He wasn't wrong to be nervous. I followed him at a distance as he drove to his office, a small real estate firm in a converted Victorian house downtown. I watched him go inside, then drove around to the alley behind the building. Greg's Mustang was parked in a small lot reserved for employees. I had a set of tools in my truck that could handle most basic automotive maintenance. Tonight, they were going to handle a little automotive sabotage. It took me less than 5 minutes to let the air out of all 4 tires. Not slashed. That would be vandalism. Just deflated. A minor inconvenience that would cost him time and money, and more importantly, would let him know that I was thinking about him. I was back in my truck and driving away before Greg would even realize what had happened. But I made sure to drive past the front of his office building, just in case he was looking out the window. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to know that his little affair had consequences. My next stop was Hannah's office. The architectural firm she shared with Monica occupied the ground floor of a renovated mill building near the river. Through the large windows, I could see both women working late, heads bent over drafting tables. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck and watched them work. Hannah looked tired and stressed. Monica looked animated, gesturing as she talked, probably discussing strategy for dealing with the mess Hannah had created. They had no idea what was coming. I drove home to find Hannah waiting for me in the living room. She'd changed into a dress I recognized, one of my favorites from when we were dating. Her hair was styled, and she was wearing makeup for the first time in months. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we already did that." "Eddie, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems." I looked at her sitting there in that dress, trying to recreate something that had been lost long before Greg Flanders entered the picture. "When did you stop loving me?" The question caught her off guard. "What?" "It's a simple question. When did you stop loving me?" "I never stopped loving you." "Then why?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I felt invisible, like I was just part of the furniture. You'd come home from work, eat dinner, watch television, go to bed. We never talked anymore, never did anything together. So you found someone who made you feel visible?" "Yes." "And that someone happened to be a married man?" "He's divorced." "He's divorced now. What about when this started?" Hannah's face flushed. "That's different." "Is it? Or are you just telling yourself that to feel better about what you did?" "Eddie, I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But we can get past this if we both want to." I sat down across from her, studying her face. She looked sincere, desperate even. But I kept thinking about Greg's tie draped over my nightstand, about the hotel charges on our credit card, about a year of lies and deception. "Here's the thing, Hannah. I might have been able to forgive the affair. People make mistakes, marriages go through rough patches. But you brought him into our house, into our bedroom. You used our money to pay for hotel rooms, and you let Monica help you cover it all up. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the year you spent making me look like a fool. What do you want me to do?" I stood up and headed for the stairs. "I want you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else tonight. The locksmith is coming tomorrow morning, and I don't want you here when he arrives. This is my house, too. Not anymore." I left her sitting in the living room and went upstairs to bed. Through the window, I could see the lights still on in Mrs. Peterson's house next door. Tomorrow, I'd have a conversation with my observant neighbor. Tonight, I had plans to make. Hannah was gone when I woke up the next morning, leaving only a note saying she was staying with Monica. Perfect. That would make the next phase much easier. The locksmith arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, a competent man who changed all the exterior locks in under 2 hours. I had him install deadbolts on the basement workshop and my home office as well. Some things needed extra security. By noon, I had new keys and complete control of my own house for the first time in a year. It felt good. Now came the fun part. Monica's house sat on a tree-lined street in the nicer part of town, a restored colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and expensive landscaping. Her BMW was parked in the circular driveway next to Hannah's Honda. They were probably inside right now, strategizing about how to minimize the damage from Hannah's affair. I didn't knock on the front door. Instead, I walked around to the backyard and found Monica's prized garden, an elaborate setup with raised beds, exotic plants, and a small greenhouse that had probably cost more than most people's cars. She was famous around town for her green thumb and her competitive streak when it came to the annual garden show. The sprinkler system was controlled by a timer box mounted on the side of the house. It took me about 30 seconds to reprogram it to run continuously for the next 6 hours. Monica's water bill was going to be interesting this month, and her precious plants were going to get more hydration than they'd bargained for. But that was just the appetizer. I drove to the office supply store and purchased a dozen disposable cell phones, the kind teenagers use when they don't want their parents tracking their calls. Then I stopped by the library and used their public computer to create several anonymous email accounts. By evening, I was ready to launch Phase 2 of my campaign. The first email went to Monica's biggest client, a wealthy retiree who was renovating a Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town. The subject line read, "Concerns about your interior designer." "Dear Mrs. Patterson," I typed. "I thought you should know that Monica Walsh has been advising her business partner to engage in extramarital affairs, including using company time and resources to facilitate these relationships. As someone who values integrity and family values, you might want to reconsider your professional relationship with someone who actively encourages adultery. A concerned citizen." I sent similar emails to 3 other major clients, each carefully worded to sound like concerned gossip rather than malicious attacks. Then I turned my attention to Greg. Greg's real estate office had a website with client testimonials and contact information. It took me less than an hour to compile a list of his recent buyers and sellers. The emails I sent to them were more direct. "Did you know that your real estate agent, Greg Flanders, has been bragging around town about his affair with a married woman? He's been using his professional contacts to impress his mistress, including arranging private showings of expensive properties for romantic encounters. You might want to consider whether someone with such poor judgment and ethics is the right person to handle your most important financial transactions." I sent those emails from different accounts, spacing them out over several hours to make them look like they came from multiple sources. By morning, Greg's reputation would be taking some serious hits. But I wasn't done yet. Hannah's architectural firm had been featured in several local publications over the years, and she'd built a solid reputation for her residential designs. That reputation was about to take a beating. I crafted a series of anonymous posts for the local Facebook groups where people discussed home renovation and design services. Each post told a slightly different version of the same story. Hannah Wilcox was having an affair with a married client, using her professional relationships for personal gain, and couldn't be trusted to maintain appropriate boundaries. The posts were carefully written to sound like disappointed clients rather than a vengeful husband. I included just enough detail to make them believable without making them obviously false. By midnight, I'd planted seeds of doubt and suspicion throughout the local business community. Now I just had to wait for them to grow. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 7:30 the next morning. It was Tom Bradley, my divorce lawyer. "Eddie, I just got an interesting call from Monica Walsh's attorney. Apparently, she's been contacted by several clients who are concerned about her business practices." "Really? What kind of concerns?" "The kind that suggests someone has been spreading rumors about her involvement in your wife's affair." Tom's voice was carefully neutral. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "I might have mentioned to a few people that Monica helped cover up Hannah's cheating. Is that a problem?" "Not legally, as long as you're telling the truth. But it might complicate things if it looks like you're conducting a harassment campaign." "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just making sure people know what kind of character they're dealing with." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Eddie, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But be careful about how far you push this. The last thing we want is for Hannah's lawyer to claim you're engaging in malicious behavior." "Noted." After I hung up, I drove to the Bowie for lunch. Tommy was working the day shift, and the bar was nearly empty except for a couple of construction workers grabbing sandwiches. "You look pleased with yourself," Tommy said as I sat down. "Just enjoying the morning? How's business?" "Interesting, actually. Greg Flanders was in here last night looking pretty rattled. Apparently he's been getting some unfriendly phone calls from clients." "Really?" "Yeah. Seems like word is getting around about his extracurricular activities. His boss at the real estate office is not happy." Tommy leaned across the bar. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "I might have mentioned Greg's situation to a few people. You know how word travels in a small town. Uh-huh. Tommy studied my face. Eddie, what exactly are you planning here? I'm planning to make sure everyone knows the truth about what Hannah and Greg did, and about Monica's role in covering it up. And then what? Then they get to live with the consequences of their choices. Tommy shook his head. You're playing with fire, my friend. This kind of thing can get out of hand fast. It's already out of hand. Has been for a year, while I was the only one who didn't know what was going on. I ordered a burger and ate it slowly, watching the lunch crowd filter in, normal people living normal lives, while mine had been turned upside down by betrayal and lies. My phone buzzed with a text message from Hannah. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I typed back, I'm just getting started. 20 minutes later, she walked into the buoy with Monica right behind her. Hannah looked tired and stressed, but Monica looked furious. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her expensive outfit was wrinkled. They sat down at the table next to mine without being invited. You need to stop this, Monica said without preamble. Stop what? You know exactly what. The emails, the phone calls, the rumors. It's harassment. I took a bite of my burger and chewed slowly before responding. I haven't harassed anyone. I've just been sharing some information with people who might find it useful. You're trying to destroy my business. Your business destroyed itself when you decided to help my wife cheat on me. Hannah leaned forward. Eddie, please. Monica didn't do anything wrong. She was just being a friend. A friend would have told you to work on your marriage or get a divorce. A friend wouldn't have helped you sneak around and lie for a year. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair? I set down my burger and looked directly at Hannah. Fair would have been you coming to me a year ago and telling me you were unhappy. Fair would have been trying counseling before you started screwing around with Greg Flanders. Fair would have been not bringing him into our house. Keep your voice down, Monica hissed, glancing around the bar. Why? Worried about what people might think? I laughed. Little late for that, don't you think? Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I know I made mistakes, but this isn't helping anyone. It's helping me. How? I leaned back in my chair, studying both women. Hannah looked genuinely distressed, but Monica just looked angry. She was worried about her reputation, her business, her comfortable life. She wasn't sorry about what she'd done. She was sorry she was facing consequences for it. It's helping me because for the first time in a year, I'm not the one being lied to. For the first time in a year, other people know the truth about what you did. The truth? Monica's voice was sharp. The truth is that Hannah was in an unhappy marriage and found someone who appreciated her. The truth is that Hannah is a cheater and you helped her cheat. That's exactly what it is. I stood up and threw some money on the table, and now everyone knows it. I walked out of the buoy, leaving them sitting there. Through the window, I could see them talking intensely, probably trying to figure out how to contain the damage. They were about to learn that some damage can't be contained. That evening, I drove past Greg's office building. His red Mustang was in the parking lot, but it was sitting lower than usual. All 4 tires were flat again. I wondered how many times I could do that before he figured out a way to stop me. I also drove past Monica's house. The sprinkler system was still running, and her front lawn looked like a swamp. A landscaping truck was parked in the driveway, and I could see workers trying to assess the damage. Small victories, but satisfying ones. My phone rang as I was driving home. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Eddie Wilcox. This is Greg Flanders. We need to talk. Do we? Look, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this campaign of yours needs to stop. What campaign? The emails, the phone calls, the tire slashing. It's harassment, and it's affecting my livelihood. Prove it. What? Prove I sent any emails or made any phone calls. Prove I touched your car. Greg was quiet for a moment. I know it was you. Knowing and proving are 2 different things. I turned into my driveway, noting that the house looked different with all the lights on and no other cars around. It looked like mine again. But let's say, hypothetically, that someone was making your life difficult. Maybe that someone thinks you deserve it. I made a mistake. You made a choice. For a year, you made the same choice over and over again. Hannah told me her marriage was over. Hannah told you what you wanted to hear so you'd keep sleeping with her. Just like she told me what I wanted to hear so I wouldn't figure out what was going on. This isn't solving anything. It's solving something for me. I hung up and went inside my house. My house with my new locks and my rules. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of something. Tomorrow, I'd escalate things a little more. The anonymous tip I called into the State Real Estate Licensing Board was carefully crafted. I didn't lie. I just presented the facts in a way that raised questions about Greg's professional conduct. I'd like to report a real estate agent who may be using his professional access to properties for personal purposes, I told the investigator. Greg Flanders has been conducting what he calls private showings of expensive homes for a woman who isn't a legitimate buyer. I have reason to believe these showings are actually romantic encounters, which would be a misuse of his professional privileges. The investigator asked for details, which I provided. Dates when I knew Hannah had been with Greg, properties that had been shown during those times, evidence of their relationship. All factual, all verifiable, all potentially damaging to Greg's real estate license. We'll look into it, the investigator said. If you have any documentation, you can email it to our office. I had documentation. Credit card receipts showing Hannah had purchased expensive lingerie the day before several of Greg's showings. Hotel charges that coincided with properties being listed and shown. Phone records showing lengthy calls between Hannah and Greg during business hours. I sent it all to the licensing board with a cover letter expressing my concern as a concerned citizen about the integrity of local real estate professionals. That was Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Greg had received a call from the licensing board informing him that his professional conduct was under investigation. I knew this because Hannah called me, screaming. "You're trying to destroy his career." "I'm trying to hold him accountable for his choices. He could lose his license. Then maybe he should have thought about that before he started using his professional access to impress married women." "Eddie, please, this has gone too far." "Has it? Because from where I sit, it feels like we're just getting started." I hung up and drove to Mrs. Peterson's house. My elderly neighbor was working in her garden, tending to a bed of roses that would have made Monica jealous. "Eddie." She looked up with a smile. "How are you holding up, dear?" "I'm managing, Mrs. Peterson. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about something." "Of course. Would you like some iced tea?" We sat on her front porch, glasses of sweet tea sweating in the afternoon heat. Mrs. Peterson was a sharp woman despite her age, and her memory for neighborhood details was encyclopedic. "I understand you may have noticed some unusual activity at my house over the past few months," I said. "Oh dear." Her face fell. "I was hoping you hadn't found out about that." "What did you see?" "Well, there was that red sports car that came by several times when you weren't home. Always during the day, usually stayed for an hour or two." "How many times?" "Oh, goodness, at least a dozen, maybe more. I started keeping track after the third or fourth time because it seemed odd." Mrs. Peterson went inside and returned with a small notebook. She flipped through several pages before finding what she was looking for. "Here we are. I started writing down the dates in March." She showed me a page covered with her neat handwriting. March 15th, March 22nd, April 3rd, April 18th. The list went on for 2 pages. Dates, times, duration of visits. Mrs. Peterson had inadvertently created a detailed record of Hannah's affair. "Mrs. Peterson, would you be willing to share this information with my attorney?" "Oh my, is it really necessary?" "It might be very helpful in my divorce proceedings." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Hannah broke her vows, didn't she? Marriage is sacred, Eddie. If this helps you get a fair settlement, then yes, I'll talk to your attorney." I thanked her and drove to Tom Bradley's office. The lawyer reviewed Mrs. Peterson's notes with obvious satisfaction. "This is excellent," he said. "A credible witness with detailed documentation. Hannah's attorney is going to have a hard time disputing this." "What about the business assets?" "That's where things get interesting." Tom leaned back in his chair. "I've been doing some research on Monica's firm. Did you know she took out a significant business loan 6 months ago?" "No. What for?" "Expansion, according to the paperwork. But the timing is suspicious, coming right around when Hannah's affair was intensifying." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Monica may have been planning to buy Hannah out of their partnership, possibly to help her start fresh after leaving you." Tom tapped his pen against his desk. "If I'm right, it means Monica was financially invested in the success of Hannah's affair." The implications were staggering. Monica hadn't just been covering for Hannah. She'd been actively facilitating the affair with the expectation of financial gain. "Can you prove it?" "I'm working on it. But if we can establish that Monica was using business resources to help Hannah cheat, it could affect how we handle the property division." I left Tom's office feeling better than I had in weeks. The legal case was solid, Greg was facing professional sanctions, and Monica's business was crumbling under the weight of lost clients and mounting gossip. But I still wasn't satisfied. That evening, I drove to the upscale restaurant where Hannah and Greg had been having their romantic dinners. The lighthouse was the kind of place that attracted couples celebrating anniversaries and business people impressing clients. It was also expensive enough that most locals saved it for special occasions. I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat in my truck across the street and waited. Sure enough, at 7:30, Greg's red Mustang pulled into the parking lot. Hannah got out of the passenger side, dressed in a cocktail dress I'd never seen before. They walked into the restaurant holding hands, looking for all the world like a happy couple. Except they weren't a couple. They were two people whose selfish choices had destroyed a marriage and were now facing the consequences. I waited until they were seated at a table near the window, then made my move. The lighthouse had valet parking, which meant Greg's car keys were hanging on a board behind the valet stand. It took me less than 2 minutes to identify the right keys and slip them into my pocket while the teenage valet was helping another customer. Greg's Mustang was parked in a prime spot near the front entrance. I started the engine and drove it exactly 3 blocks to the police station, where I parked it in a handicapped space directly in front of the main entrance. Then I called the police non-emergency line. "I'd like to report a vehicle illegally parked in a handicapped space at the police station," I said. "Red Mustang, license plate." I read off Greg's plate number. "We'll send someone to check it out," the dispatcher said. I walked back to the lighthouse and slipped Greg's keys back onto the valet board. Then I returned to my truck and waited. Dinner service at the lighthouse was notoriously slow, designed to encourage customers to linger over multiple courses and expensive wine. Greg and Hannah would be inside for at least 2 hours, plenty of time for the police to discover his illegally parked car and have it towed. Sure enough, about 45 minutes later, I saw a police cruiser pull into the lighthouse parking lot. The officer got out and spoke to the valet, who looked confused and kept shaking his head. I drove home, satisfied with the evening's work. Greg would discover his missing car when he tried to leave the restaurant. He'd have to call the police to report it stolen, only to learn that it had been towed from a handicapped space at the police station. He'd have to pay towing fees, parking fines, and explain to Hannah why their romantic evening had ended with her calling a taxi. Small humiliations, but they were adding up. My phone rang as I was getting ready for bed. It was Hannah. "I know you took his car." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Eddie, this is insane. You can't keep doing this." "Doing what? I've been home all evening." "The valet said someone matching your description was asking about red cars." "Lots of people match my description. It's a common look." "This isn't funny." "You're right. It's not funny. It's justice." "It's harassment?" "Prove it." I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I'd take things to the next level. The plan I'd been developing was simple but effective. Hannah, Greg, and Monica had humiliated me publicly by conducting their affair in plain sight while I remained oblivious. Now it was time to return the favor. But first, I needed to gather more intelligence, and I knew exactly where to get it. Monica's business partner, Olivia Chen, had always struck me as the more practical of the two women. Where Monica was flashy and social, Olivia was quiet and focused on the bottom line. She handled the financial side of their interior design firm, while Monica schmoozing with clients and handled the creative work. I found Olivia at her office on Friday evening, working late as usual. She looked up when I knocked on the doorframe, her expression wary. "Eddie, I heard about everything. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" She hesitated, then nodded toward a chair across from her desk. "I suppose we should?" I sat down and looked around the office. It was neat and organized, with financial charts on the walls and stacks of invoices on the desk. This was where the real work of the business got done. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About Hannah and Greg? I suspected something was going on about 6 months ago. Hannah started taking a lot of long lunches, making personal calls during work hours. Monica was covering for her." "Did you know Monica was planning to buy Hannah out?" Olivia's face tightened. "Where did you hear that?" "My attorney did some digging. Monica took out a business loan 6 months ago. Significant amount. That loan was for equipment and office expansion." "Was it?" Olivia was quiet for a long moment, studying her hands. "Monica said it was an investment in the future of the firm." "Whose future? Yours or Hannah's?" "I don't know what you mean." I leaned forward. "Olivia, I'm not here to cause you problems, but I think Monica has been making plans that don't include you." "That's not true." "Then why has she been meeting with other interior designers? Why has she been talking to commercial real estate agents about larger office space? And why hasn't she discussed any of this with you?" Olivia's face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "Same way I found out about Hannah's affair. I started paying attention." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken 3 days earlier. It showed Monica having lunch with Rebecca Walsh, the owner of the most successful interior design firm in the county. They were looking at documents spread across the table. Monica's been exploring her options, I said. I think she was planning to dissolve your partnership and start fresh with Hannah. The business loan was seed money for their new venture. You're lying. Am I? When was the last time Monica discussed the firm's finances with you? When was the last time you saw the books for the business loan? Olivia didn't answer, but her expression told me everything I needed to know. She's been planning to cut you out, I continued. Help Hannah leave her marriage, dissolve your partnership, and start over with someone she thinks has more potential. Monica wouldn't do that. Monica helped my wife cheat for a year. She lied to me, she lied to you, and she's been lying to her clients about her professional ethics. I put my phone away. What makes you think she wouldn't lie about her business plans? Olivia stared at her desk for a long moment. What do you want from me? I want the truth about Monica's loan and her plans for the business. In exchange, I'll make sure you don't get dragged down with her when this all comes out. What do you mean? Monica's reputation is finished in this town. Half her clients have already fired her, and the other half will follow once word gets around about her role in Hannah's affair. But you're clean. You didn't know what was going on, and you weren't part of the cover-up. I still don't understand what you want. I leaned back in my chair. I want you to look at those loan documents. I want you to check Monica's recent business communications. And I want you to ask yourself whether you're really partners or whether you're just the person who handles the paperwork while Monica makes the real decisions. Olivia was quiet for several minutes. Finally, she opened her laptop and began typing. The loan documents are in our shared business folder, she said. Monica handles most of the financial planning, but I should have access. She trailed off, staring at the screen. What is it? I don't have access to the loan folder. It's password protected. When did that happen? I don't know. It wasn't protected last month when I reviewed our quarterly reports. Olivia tried several more folders, her frown deepening with each failed attempt. I can't access any of the recent financial documents. Monica must have changed the permissions. Why would she do that? I don't know. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. We're supposed to be partners. I watched her face as the implications sank in. Monica had been systematically cutting her out of the business decisions, preparing for a future that didn't include her. There's more, I said gently. Monica's been telling people that the firm's recent problems are due to your poor financial management. She's been positioning herself as the creative talent held back by an incompetent business partner. That's not true. I know it's not true. You've been keeping this business afloat while Monica played matchmaker for my wife. I stood up. But unless you do something about it, Monica's version is going to become the accepted truth. What can I do? You can protect yourself. Document everything Monica has hidden from you. Change the business bank account passwords, secure the client files and financial records. I headed for the door. And you can decide whether you want to be the victim of Monica's schemes or the one who exposes them. I left Olivia sitting at her desk, staring at her laptop screen. By morning, she'd either be Monica's ally or her worst enemy. Either way, the partnership that had enabled Hannah's affair was about to implode. Saturday morning brought the final phase of my plan. I'd been thinking about public humiliation, about the way Hannah and Greg had conducted their affair in plain sight while I remained oblivious. They'd been comfortable with their deception because they thought I'd never find out, never fight back, never make them pay a price for their choices. It was time to prove them wrong. The annual Founders' Day festival was the biggest event of the year in our town. Local businesses set up booths in the town square, families brought picnic lunches, and everyone came out to celebrate. It was the kind of event where you'd run into everyone you knew, where gossip spread faster than wildfire, and where reputations could be made or destroyed in the space of an afternoon. Hannah and Monica would be there, representing their design firm with a booth showcasing their recent projects. Greg would probably be there too, working the crowd and trying to drum up real estate business. It was the perfect opportunity for a very public confrontation. I arrived early and set up my own display on a folding table near the center of the square. The banner I'd had printed read, "Truth in Marriage," a public service announcement. Below that, I'd arranged a collection of materials that told the story of Hannah's affair in vivid detail. There were enlarged photos of credit card statements showing the hotel charges, printouts of Mrs. Peterson's detailed log of Greg's visits to my house, copies of the business loan documents that Olivia had provided, showing Monica's secret financial planning. And in the center of it all, a large poster with photos of Hannah, Greg, and Monica under the heading, "These People Destroyed a 15-Year Marriage." I also had a stack of flyers with more detailed information, including a timeline of the affair and documentation of Monica's role in covering it up. The flyers were professionally printed and looked like legitimate informational materials rather than the rantings of a bitter husband. By 10 o'clock, a crowd had gathered around my table. People were reading the materials, whispering to each other, and taking photos with their phones. The story was spreading through the festival like a virus. At 10:30, Hannah arrived with Monica. They were dressed professionally and carrying materials for their business booth, clearly expecting a normal day of networking and client development. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. I saw Hannah spot my table from across the square. Her face went white, and she grabbed Monica's arm, pointing in my direction. Monica's reaction was even more dramatic. She actually dropped the box she was carrying, sending business cards and brochures scattering across the ground. They stood there for a moment, frozen, while people around them started to stare and whisper. Then Monica marched toward my table, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this," she said when she reached me. "Actually, I can. It's a public event, and everything on this table is factually accurate. It's harassment. It's truth-telling." A small crowd had gathered around us, listening to the confrontation. I could see people holding my flyers, reading about Hannah's affair and Monica's complicity. Some of them were taking photos and videos with their phones. Hannah approached more slowly, looking like she might be sick. "Eddie, please, take this down." "Why? Embarrassed about something?" "You're humiliating me." "You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." Greg appeared from somewhere in the crowd, pushing through the gathering spectators. He looked furious and desperate. "This is slander," he said. "I'll sue you for every penny you have." "Truth isn't slander," I replied calmly. "Everything here is documented and verifiable." "You're destroying people's lives." "Funny. That's exactly what you three did to mine." The crowd was growing larger, drawn by the drama and the raised voices. I could see people reading my materials and sharing them with others. The story was spreading beyond the immediate area, carried by social media and text messages. Monica tried a different approach. "Eddie, I know you're hurt, but this isn't helping anyone. Let's talk about this privately." "We had a year to talk privately. You chose to spend that time helping my wife cheat instead." "I was trying to help Hannah work through her feelings." "You were trying to help Hannah leave her marriage so you could start a new business together." Monica's face went pale. "That's not true." I pulled out a folder and handed her a document. "Business plan for Walsh Wilcox Design Consultants. Filed with the State Business Registration Office 3 weeks ago. Guess whose names are on the incorporation papers?" Monica stared at the document, her hands shaking. Around us, the crowd was getting larger and more animated. People were pointing, whispering, and clearly enjoying the drama. "You've been planning this for months," I continued. "Help Hannah destroy her marriage, dissolve your partnership with Olivia, and start fresh with my wife as your new business partner. All funded by a business loan you took out under false pretenses." "That's not... I wasn't..." "You weren't what? Planning to steal Hannah away from her husband and Olivia away from her business? Because that's exactly what these documents show." Hannah was crying now, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences in the most public way possible. Greg tried to grab the folder from Monica's hands, but I stepped between them. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Assault in front of 50 witnesses probably isn't going to help your real estate license situation." "My license? Oh, you didn't know? The state licensing board is investigating your professional conduct. Something about using your access to properties for personal romantic encounters." Greg's face went from red to white. "You reported me." "I reported what I observed. What the board does with that information is up to them." The crowd around us was now large enough to block foot traffic through the square. People were holding up phones, recording the confrontation. I could see the story spreading in real time as people shared videos and photos on social media. "This is enough," Hannah said through her tears. "Eddie, you've made your point. Please, just stop." I looked at her standing there, crying in front of half the town. This woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd thrown it all away for a smooth-talking real estate agent with a flashy car. "You want me to stop? Fine, I'll stop." I began packing up my materials. "But not because you asked me to, because I'm done with all of you." I folded up my table and loaded everything into my truck while the crowd watched. Hannah, Monica, and Greg stood there looking shell-shocked, surrounded by dozens of people who now knew exactly what they'd done. As I drove away, I could see them still standing in the town square, trying to figure out how to salvage their reputations from the wreckage of their choices. My phone started ringing before I'd even made it home. Tom Bradley, my divorce attorney. "Eddie, what the hell did you just do?" "I told the truth. In the most public way possible." Sometimes that's the only way people pay attention. Tom was quiet for a moment. "Well, you've certainly gotten their attention. Hannah's attorney just called me. They want to settle." What kind of settlement? The kind where you get everything you asked for and they try to minimize the damage to their reputations. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house Hannah and I had shared for 15 years. It looked different now, smaller somehow, but also more peaceful. Set up the meeting, I told Tom. Let's finish this. The settlement conference took place the following Tuesday in Tom Bradley's office. Hannah arrived with her attorney, a nervous-looking man who kept glancing at his phone as if expecting more bad news. She looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. The terms were simple. I would keep the house and most of our joint assets. Hannah would take her personal belongings and her share of the business, assuming she still had a business to share. The divorce would be finalized within 60 days. There's one more thing, Hannah's attorney said. My client would like you to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the events of the past week. I laughed. You want me to promise not to talk about something I already announced to the entire town? My client is concerned about ongoing harassment. Your client should have been concerned about that before she decided to cheat on her husband. Tom leaned forward. Eddie gets the house, the truck, the workshop equipment, and 70% of the joint savings. Hannah gets her car, her personal belongings, and 30% of the savings. No alimony, no ongoing financial obligations. That's not equitable, Hannah's attorney protested. Adultery affects equitable distribution in Maine, Tom replied, especially when it involves the use of marital assets to fund the affair. We have documentation of hotel charges, restaurant bills, and gift purchases. Your client is lucky we're not asking for reimbursement. Hannah signed the papers without looking at me. When it was over, she stood up and walked toward the door, then turned back. I hope you're happy, she said. I looked at this woman who'd been my wife for 15 years, who'd shared my dreams and my bed, who'd thrown it all away for excitement and attention. I'm not happy, I said, but I'm free. She left without another word. 3 months later, I heard through Tommy that Hannah had left town. The design business had collapsed after Monica's financial schemes came to light, and Olivia dissolved their partnership. Greg had lost his real estate license and was working at a car dealership 2 towns over. Monica had declared bankruptcy and moved in with her sister in Florida. I kept the house and turned Hannah's old office into a library. The basement workshop became my sanctuary, a place where I could build things with my hands and not think about betrayal or revenge or the wreckage of a 15-year marriage. Sometimes late at night, I'd sit in my workshop and think about what I'd done. The public humiliation, the systematic destruction of 3 people's reputations and careers. It had been thorough, effective, and completely legal. It had also been necessary. Hannah, Greg, and Monica had made their choices freely, with full knowledge of the consequences. They'd gambled that they could deceive and humiliate me without paying a price. They'd been wrong, and now they knew it.